Good evening, everyone. Thank you for being here. My name is Ellen Schaff, and I am the Executive Director of the Waunakee Area Chamber of Commerce. And beside me is Roberta Bauman, Editor of the Waunakee Tribune, who also will be the moderator for tonight. I want to thank the candidates and all of you for being here tonight, sharing your time, talents, and willingness to want to serve in village government on behalf of Waunakee. Thank you for that. And to you, the audience, for being here and taking the time out. Obviously, you want to be informed on the important choices that will affect our community, continued growth and success. Some points to keep in mind as we listen to all these candidates is what is important to you and what are you looking for in village government leadership. Evaluate the candidates stands on not only issues, but their experience and what they can bring to the table and their passion to serve the community. Tonight's forum will be videotaped and it will be uploaded to YouTube for you to refer back to and for you to share with others who were not able to make it here tonight. The rules are fairly simple. There were 4 questions that were provided in advance to the 8 candidates. Each person will have 3 minutes to respond, up to 3 minutes. Roberta will ask the question and call on the person to start. Beth and myself will be in the middle here with the timer, and basically Beth will put up just for the candidates to know when to go and when you have 30 seconds and when to stop, to kind of give you an idea of how to pace your sentences. Let's see, please no applause. This is not a public discussion. At the conclusion of the forum, there will be an opportunity for you in the audience to meet the candidates one-on-one if they're able to stay around. And that will not be on videotape. So first, I'd like to give a round of applause to our candidates for coming tonight. And with that, I will turn it over to Roberta Bauman.
Again, thanks for coming and thanks for your passion to our community, all of you. A lot of you know that the election is April 2nd. 6 candidates have filed for 3 trustee seats, and the top 3 vote getters will serve a 2-year term. The candidates for trustees are Susan Springman and Phil Willems, who are both incumbents. Gary Herzberg is a former village trustee, and Ann Lewandowski, Mary Heimbecker, and Robert McPherson have filed as well. For village president, Chris Zellner filed for re-election, and Frank Bergman later registered as a write-in candidate. Before we begin, I would like the candidates to just take a minute to introduce themselves and tell us a little bit about why they're running for the board. And I'm going to start with Frank.
Frank Bergman. No one else seemed to want to run, and I didn't think it'd be right if we didn't have some conversation on the issues in the village. The only way we're going to get the conversation is if somebody runs, of course. And I'd like to see changes in Waunakee. I think we're going in the wrong direction a little too quickly.
Did everybody hear Frank?
No.
No.
You may want to pick up
Yeah,
that
maybe
microphone
use the
and
microphone.
then kind of pass it along. Okay. Do we have to turn them on? They were on. They were on.
Oh, we're going to have to pass them back and forth.
My name is Mary Heimbecker. I was born and raised on my family farm in the Waunakee area. I have lived here my entire life, graduating in 1977 from Waunakee High School, moving to the village in 1979 when my family sold our family farm. I have 3 children and 8 grandchildren. I am running to have more transparency in our village government, have more attainable housing for different incomes, and continued business growth. My work experience was with the state. I did event planning for conferences, including an international conference which had over 100 participants. My experience included financial payments and reimbursement. I did desktop support for many years, and I trained workers on new software. Currently, I own and operate a computer business here in Waunakee. If I see something that needs to be done, I dive in and get it done. I will bring a farmer's work ethic and common sense to the village board. An example was last night, the village attorney kept mentioning using a vacant store agreement to protect the village if one of the competing grocery stores went out of business. I don't know what a vacant store agreement is, and no one asked for an explanation. I would have done that.
Hi, I'm Gary Hertzberg. I served on the village board for
How's that? There we go. I'm Gary Hertzberg. I served on the village board for 17 years. Originally from Columbus, Wisconsin, grew up on a dairy farm, moved to Waunakee 24 years ago, I believe. Raised 2 children, Mark and Lisa, who graduated through Waunakee and are graduating through the University of Madison. My wife, Jean, was able to stay at home and raise our family. Been involved in Waunakee for probably 20 years. Started building parks, conservancies. I've worked on school projects. Once I got into village government, I found I really had a passion for it because I like to see Waunakee grow and get better. I didn't win my election last year, and probably because I didn't work very hard at it. So I'm trying harder.
Hi, my name is Anne Lewandowski, and thank you all for coming out tonight. I'm deeply honored by the feedback and support that I have received as I've started going door to door to all of our community. One gentleman sort of looked at me a little confused when I showed up on his doorstep, and I told him the least I can do is come to your door and ask you for this job. So that is the ethic that I bring to Village Board, that you are entrusting me with your vote, and really it's a trust-based relationship. I'm here because I believe that I bring a new perspective on economic development. I work in rural areas, and I believe that they have some things that we can offer, which is really a local-based focused for local community, for local businesses. And as I've shared with some of you before, one of the most interesting challenges that I heard from the 40 hospital
Hello, my name is Robert McPherson. I moved to Waunakee in 2013. I moved here with my then fiance, now wife. I now have a 2-year-old child that I am looking forward to putting into the great school system here in Waunakee. I am a vice president at a community bank that's actually based out of Florida, but we own a mortgage office up here in Madison. In there, I'm a compliance officer. I work in fair lending. I manage an appraisal management team and the quality control team. So I've done a little bit of everything as far as banking goes. The reason I decided to run for trustee is that I spent a lot of years here watching the growth, and I started to become concerned. When you work in fair lending, you start to notice patterns in lending. You start to see that certain people are not given opportunities in certain markets. This market is really starting to show that the median home prices are spiraling out of control. Now you look at the village board and you say, you guys are the ones who set the land use. Oh, apparently it's, yeah, sorry, that's all right. I'll talk more later.
I'm Sue Springman, and I've been on the village board for 14 years. I'm proud to be an incumbent, and I've been proud of the work that I've done. I run because I want to give back to the community, and it's the best way that I can. I have a lot of experience that I think I've been able to offer and wish to continue to offer. I've worked in the legislature, state government, for a city, and I'm currently, of course, on the board. I've been in the private sector, and I've been in the nonprofit sector. I also serve on a bank as a director. I understand how finance works and how projects are put together, what works and what does not work. And I just like serving the community.
Bill Willems, self-employed businessman in Waunakee since 1975. And I'm currently almost retired, I think, so I can keep giving some time. I'm running for re-election for the village board because I think we're going the right way. We've got a great town, we've been growing very nicely, and I'd like to see us keep growing in the right way. Thank you.
My name is Chris Sellner. I'm currently the village president, and I'd like to thank all the candidates for running for positions for the village. It's very important that we have people take up this duty, and I've been a resident here since I was 6 weeks old. I didn't bring myself here, I was brought here by my parents back in 1969. And I will tell you that I run for the village board because of the people that are here today, but also all the community. It's the people that matter, and there's nobody that's bigger critics of me than of my family. And I have a great deal of family that's in the community. So anything that other people are putting on me, they're doing probably even worse, to be clear. Our community is exceptional. We've been ranked #1 in the top 10 in the country for places to raise a family. That's partly what the board does, but mostly important is what the people are doing in the community. So to me, this is all about you tonight, to make sure that you guys get answered questions that you may have for all of us. So thank you.
Okay, we'll proceed with the questions that the Chamber and the Tribune put together from after soliciting our members and our readers. So each candidate will have 3 minutes to answer each question. The first is, please list Waunakee's top 3 challenges and top 3 strengths. What role should village government take to address, maintain, or support these points? And we'll start with Mary.
3 of the challenges I feel that the village is having right now is poor infrastructure. Many streets and sidewalks need repair. I would advocate to have more money put into our current infrastructure. For any new streets being built, should have money put in for maintenance of the existing streets. We could also search for grants to see if that's available for upkeep of our infrastructure. Housing needs for people who work in Waunakee. The lack of housing for people working in Waunakee is a problem. I was speaking to a business owner who pays his employees $22.50 per hour, but the employee could not find housing here in Waunakee to live. This creates a hardship for our business owners. It is hard to find workers that are needed for our healthcare, service industries, and industrial park. If a development asks for TIF money, the village can request that a variety of housing needs to be put in the new development. Our comprehensive plan calls for a variety of mixed housing. An option for the village could be to partner with Habitat for Humanity also. Looking into alternative transportation would be beneficial to alleviate traffic issues. Transportation other than owner-operated vehicles such as bus routes, shuttles around town, bike paths, and walking. I would like to search for solutions to people living within the 1.7-mile area of the school bus routes. Kids within the 1.75-mile area to their school are not bused. It would be good to find a solution for those parents who work to have a way to get their kids to school. Perhaps a shuttle from pickup points that parents could pay for would be worth pursuing. That would cut down on the traffic going to all of our schools. The senior shuttle is currently underused. Perhaps we could partner with them to provide more options. Some of our strengths, I feel, are the Waunakee Neighborhood Connection and the Waunakee Ecumenical Food Pantry. I have volunteered at the food pantry and I donate to both. I feel it's important to Waunakee citizens to work together to help those who are less fortunate. A strong sense of community in the neighborhoods. I am proud of my neighbors getting involved and having a say in the development growth. I see that sense of community throughout the villages. Neighbor talks to each other, lends a hand to each other when needed, and want to have a say in keeping our small town feel while experiencing growth. I think our schools are also a great, awesome asset. This is Waunakee's greatest strength. That is part of why I'm running. I'm concerned about the increase in TIFs in the last 4 years. The extra tax money for the increase in value goes to the developer for the life of the TIF. So other areas of the village pick up the cost of educating the new students that come in with residential TIF development. We are looking at a possible school referendum in 2020, so balancing growth with school needs is what I want to do.
As far as challenges facing Waunakee today, I think, we all talk about affordable or workforce housing and how do we make that happen. The village has a task force established. They're halfway through their process to come up with some ideas and proposals that they'll present to the village board. I think we have a balance today of about 75% single family housing to 25% multifamily. That seems to be a good balance. It's worked for us. So I think that's a target that we'll probably, continue to focus on. Another challenge for us today is, I think, our roads and infrastructure. Over the last 10 years or 15 years, we introduced what they call PAYGO funds. These are monies that are set aside specifically out of our general fund for repair of roads, and we've increased that. I think it originally started at about $350,000. We moved it up, I think, 2 years ago to $1 million a year. So we focused on continuing to improve our infrastructure. The thing that you have to balance, in the end, the number one thing everybody out in this audience will say is, well, what about my taxes? So it's a kind of a balancing act of where you come up with the funds, and our public Works Department does an awesome job of taking care of our streets. For those people that don't get out of Waunakee much, if you drive to other communities in the surrounding area, I believe our streets are in much better shape than most communities you'll drive through. Let's see. Also, I think one of the things we need to look at as a challenge is how do we take care of our services? And when I look at services, I talk about public works and streets, police, fire and EMS. So today, for example, our police department, I think it has the lowest per capita police officer to resident ratio maybe in the state, and we're one of the safest communities. So that's an area, if we have more issues and have to hire more police, our taxes are going to continue to go up. People don't give enough credit to our EMS and volunteer fire department. The number one thing in my mind that keeps our taxes in line where they are today is the volunteers that work tirelessly to make this community better, and they do it on a volunteer basis, and that keeps our taxes very low. I'd like to also see some industrial growth in the business park. I think that would help out in the community. Thank you.
Thank you. So I'm going to start on the positive note because that's really where I prefer to start. And obviously, as I'm running as a first-time challenger, I see some challenges. So I see the opportunities that Waunakee has done very well with as our schools, attracting highly talented, smart people, and community. As the business, since this is the chamber, I think that the relationship between the schools and the businesses are really amazing. And the Innovation Center, where we grow those young minds, is phenomenal. And really what I want to see us do better on is retaining those young people here in the community. Waunakee has some phenomenally smart people. And what's been a little bit concerning to me as I've gone around and talked with people is they've said that they volunteered their expertise. I've heard engineers say they talked about some library projects or school, and they volunteered that service of review for us for free. And they were maybe not listened to as adequately as they could have been, and that's a little bit concerning to me. The community here is amazing. I agree with Gary that our volunteer services are incredible. I was a part of the Citizens Academy last year, and that was amazing. I don't know if you guys can, but I promised the police officers that I'd always do a pitch for them. So if you ever want to take a police car out and drive it on the track, the Citizens Academy is the way to do that. So, and so on to the challenges that I see. I see infrastructure, transparency, and again, the workforce housing as challenges. Infrastructure. We've heard over and over about some of the railroad crossings, and the one at Division Street I think is particularly challenging. We have many outstanding millions of dollars in road funding, and certainly talking with how to address that road crossing would be very important. And so how the village can do that is they can pass a resolution, and then if we need to, we can send it to the office on the Commission of Railroads and really force them to listen that this is a need in our community. Transparency, I think the way that noticing is done could be done better. I think the meeting times, many people live outside of Waunakee. And so the meeting times, I've heard people comment over and over that 6 o'clock is not a good time. And finally, workforce. As I started to say earlier, our hospital CEOs say they don't need help creating jobs. What they need is housing to house their workers. And I see the now hiring signs all throughout the village. And I worry that our housing costs are driving up and driving out the workforce and increasing the cost of turnover for your employees. Thank you.
So I too, I think would be appropriate to start with the strengths, because I think it really underlines what the challenge is, or why we need to address the challenges the way we need to address them that I'm going to present. So I really would like to start with one of the biggest strengths of Waunakee is our community. We are, as we say, the only Waunakee in the world. When we have people come and do outside studies of Waunakee, like from the University of Wisconsin, like they did last year, they met with the community members, and the community, stuck out with them. That was one of their key findings when they were doing the Creative Economy Initiative. They stated that we have a very strong sense of community. Our neighbors help each other. Our neighbors know each other. We love to volunteer for community events, and we like to make sure that everyone in the community feels included. It's important that at a government level that we continue to support these types of activities. And I know this is a later question, so I'll get into that a bit more there. Another item that's a part of our strengths is the tax base. The tax base is very important because the tax base pays for pretty much everything that we do in the government level. If the tax base starts to falter, our schools start to falter. If the tax base starts to falter, our infrastructure falters. The tax base is the key. Well, how do we keep building that tax base? Well, let's move into one of the challenges, affordable housing. Affordable housing is what drives our economy. Affordable housing is what brings workers into the village to work those jobs. The people who are our servers in our restaurants, the people who are our retail shop workers, the people that service inside the shops at places like Nord. These are people that are not CEOs. They can't afford to live where I live at Southbridge. They can't afford to live anywhere in Waunakee currently. There's just not enough houses for them. There's nowhere that they can rent. I had one gentleman who works at SBL contact me and said, I live with a slumlord. What's the village going to do about it? My answer, well, we can't do anything right now because we haven't put any controls in place. This is the type of foresight that we expect from our board. We expect them to account for everybody in the community, not just the people who can afford to pay the high cost to enter it. Another challenge that comes off with this is infrastructure. Woodland Road is a great example of infrastructure that has kind of gone a little sideways. Past 3 years, we've seen a backhoe come out there and stamp the road back down after we had the little bumps form. And then last year we brought in, I don't even know what to call what it is right now, but it looks like speed bumps at this point. We now know that it's going to cost $500,000 to actually fix it. So why didn't we just rip off the Band-Aid and fix it the right way the first time? Another challenge that ties into affordable housing that I've already kind of touched on is attracting businesses. It's very hard for a new business to come out here if they know that they have to get people to come in from Madison. And people are just going to work in Madison. They're not going to drive all the way to Waunakee. There's more jobs in Madison. There's more affordable housing in Madison. It's time that we get proactive about this. It's time that we start helping everybody in Waunakee and not just those that can afford to live here. Sorry.
So the top three strengths that I see, quality of life in schools is one. Many of us have touched on this already. If you were here 10 years ago and you actually add up all the infrastructure that has been added to this community, I think you'd be surprised because we kind of take it for granted. New police station, new public works, new EMS, new fire station. We have improved all the major roads coming into this community. We have a roundabout we didn't have before. You can actually get around Main Street much faster than you're ever used to. So there have been many types of infrastructure added. Our parks, we have 27 parks. We have so many facilities in our parks. We have activities for all ages in this community, at the senior center and the community center with the fitness center. We're in it right now. These are all great things. Do we need more money for the roads? Yes, and I see that coming, and it has started, and I see it continuing. One thing you need to know, unlike many communities, we do not assess our citizens for their share of roads and sidewalks. We pick it all up. That's one of the things that kind of keeps us behind, but I don't think anybody wants us to assess them. The tax rate. We're in the bottom 1/3 of property taxes in Dane County. We have been, and we will continue to be, in spite of all of these improvements, which is pretty remarkable. We also have a debt policy that is about 37% of what the state allows. We are way below what we could borrow. We have a self-imposed limit. Our volunteer EMS and fire district are phenomenal. It's been touched on before. this keeps your property taxes down. A lot of people don't realize it. Top 3 challenges: retaining our EMS and fire department as volunteers. We pay almost 70% of that cost. We help borrow for its equipment. We have public works employees who are able to go on calls during the day to help staff it. We need to continue to do those things and to support those individuals who provide great service. We need to continue to grow at a pace that holds down our taxes and doesn't overload services. I think we've done a great job of that. We need affordable housing, but we need expensive housing. It costs a little over $11,000 to educate a student. A $500,000 house pays that. The lower the cost of the house, the less taxes, and so someone's got to make that up. The third thing is keeping our Main Street strong economically, and I think we've done a great job. If you saw the Main Street 10 years ago, you see it today. I have people commented on it all the time that it's beautiful.
Well, it's obviously quality of life. We have a great park system in Waunakee, one of the best I've ever seen. We have a great school system, obviously, and we have a good base of citizens. And we're blessed with a dynamite staff in the village in almost every department. I think some of our challenges are going to be to keep that park system great, because as big as it is, it's a challenge. We have to accelerate our road repair. You've heard we recently moved it up to $1 million a year. Well, that won't be enough pretty soon, because we're repairing roads that were built to a different standard to handle less loads. For example, one of the roads that's going to be repaired is Woodland Drive. Well, that was built by a state contract, and the state would insist on using recycled concrete and et cetera in there. Well, this is a product that retains water, caused the bumps. Yes, we're going to have to fix it. They're not going to help us to fix it, but for a while, we're going to have to spend a little bit more money. It might cost us taxes, it might not, depending on what we can tackle at that time. We are going to have to address the housing issue. That's easier said than done. I myself live in a house that's about $250,000. I think that's fairly affordable. A lot of people that work at Nord and et cetera could live in my house. I'm not ready to sell it yet, but they could. They don't have to live in a $500,000 house. I didn't. I'm fine. I'm finished.
No applause, Phil. Okay. So I would echo everything that Phil and Sue just commented on. We're all on the village board, so we are entrenched in all of these issues all the time. Woodland Drive, which has just been brought up, is a road that is done by the county, Westport, and Waunakee. It's not just Waunakee, it's Waunakee and Westport, so we have to come to an agreement on how to handle that road together, so we don't have to pay for the entire bill. So it's important that when people are talking about different roads, that they understand all the background of the situation. As far as our challenges, and I look at them as opportunities, our fire and EMS, most important is our safety. Those volunteers put in thousands of hours every year to help us as a community. On top of the fire and EMS, though, is our police. Police have been very difficult for us to recruit, and they're going to continue to be that way into the future. Their jobs are not easy, all right, with everything that they're now faced with. Same thing with teachers. Those are two things that are going to be a challenge for the community coming up. Our infrastructure, and where we can go with that infrastructure, our budget needs to be in good shape to be able to take care of that infrastructure. Right now, I will say that we are in a sweet spot for where our housing is. So that increase in revenue that we have on an annual basis will help us to offset those things and improve those roads. As Sue mentioned, we've been able to take care of our fire, EMS, public works facility, the village center, a library, all of those things. Those are all completed now. Our roads were kind of left off to the side for too many years, frankly. But we have been increasing that budget in the last 4 years. Our strengths, I mentioned it right off the bat, our people. They're the heart of our community. Everyone who comes into our community has to have a passion for the community. Not just our village leaders, but all the people need to have that passion. And in Waunakee, we do. Our businesses are the backbone of our community. Without the businesses, we really would struggle. They provide services for us. They provide jobs for us. All of those critical to our success. And then our schools. Our schools are the brain. Okay, they educate our youth, so those youth can get out into society and find jobs and careers that will support themselves. This brings us back to one of the challenges, housing. We want to make sure those students can come back and afford to live here. We'll continue to work on that. We're going through that with a study right now. And I would say that our last meeting was probably the best meeting we've had. If you have a chance to go on YouTube, please do so. It's very informative on what we have for options. Thank you.
You can all hear me? You can all hear me? Challenges, 30,000 vehicles a day in the next 10 years down Main Street. 40 million debt, 10 million more will be added when we start fixing our streets. We were already told that. There's no money. After the money runs out, then we hope nothing else breaks. Thirdly, on challenges, I'd like to see we need to create a full-time presidency. We need to get that 100% concentration on Waunakee and that 100% visualness, that in-placeness of a full-time presidency. If we did that, we'd accomplish a couple of different things. The other thing we'd accomplish would people from the community would come forward and want to run for office and be in office then. And we'd have the salary to go with it, such and such. Strengths, of course, is the school and the experienced people we have here. There are many concerned taxpayers who are demanding more voice in the decision-making process. Other strengths that we seem to forget: we're 12 miles from Madison, 8 from Sun Prairie, 4 from Middleton. Why recreate what's already there for us at our taxpayer expense? Steps to take: the full-time presidency, and we need the 3 new fresh voices as the trustees. We need to get a timeline from the DOT on Highway 19. We need something definite from them so we can make some plans for the future. It doesn't make sense building all that on Main Street if it's going to continue to they said 30,000, it could go higher within the next 10 years. We need more early in the game type participation of interested citizens before 3/4 of a final decision is made. It seems like the decisions are made, when the decision comes out, it's already almost too late for the rest of us to chime in. It's, oh, wait a minute, we didn't know that. And so we need a process where we can come in earlier on the whole process. The closed meetings that we've had, we all know are excessive, and that has to be curbed. If we have to go to a closed meeting, we need some type of trusted third-party witness to satisfy the village that all is on the up and up.
Okay, our next question, and we'll start with Gary Herzberg. If you were presented with a proposal for a development project, what criteria would you use to evaluate whether it should be approved? Does the comprehensive plan factor in, and what criteria would warrant awarding tax incremental finance dollars?
Yes, the comprehensive plan, for those of you who don't know, we work on that with the town of Westport and Waunakee, and we put together a comprehensive plan, and that's really a roadmap for the development of either the town or the village and what direction we go. I think it's important in any type of development is engaging the neighborhood early, and we had one a year ago, and we were looking at a project on Main Street, and at the planning commission level, for example, one meeting, the people that were against that development all came to the meeting and said, don't do this, don't do this. At the next meeting, 2 weeks or a month later, all the people that owned the property and been living there for 20 years, 25 years said, oh no, you have to do this, we want to sell our properties, you have to be engaged. It would have been nice to have all those people in the same room and, you know, heard that same story at one time. So I think it's important that we get the right group of people that is affected by the development all together in a single hearing. I think we have to look at the development itself. Does it fit within the comprehensive plan? Does it meet a housing need for the community? Does it meet an employment need for the community? I think then we also have to look, if we want to look at TIF, is there infrastructure in the comprehensive plan, a future road or street that might be incorporated into that development? And if not for the development, that infrastructure can't be put in. I think that's where TIF, it's been a proven tool. We've used with it in the village here for 15 to 20 years. So I think we have to look at the circumstances, and on any TIF, you know, we depend on the village staff. We have this Ehlers and Associates as a consultant in the state. It then goes to the Joint Review Board, which is made up of the schools and MATC. So it gets a thorough looking at from a lot of different perspectives before any TIF is approved. Thanks.
Thank you. I'd like to circle back to one of the comments somebody else made about not assessing for sidewalks, and that's kind of an interesting comment given that there was a discussion of sidewalk assessments for homeowners just a couple of weeks ago. So in terms of development, this has been near and dear to my heart. And certainly I know that our comprehensive plan is our guide and our vision. As Gary said, that was created with a lot of citizen input, and I think sticking to it is fantastic. I think we can do a little bit better in terms of talking about the standards that it creates. When I was looking at it over this weekend, I happened to notice that there was just a lot of community residential. And that doesn't really give us a good narrative as taxpayers to know what exactly we might be putting in there. It might be duplexes, triplexes, single family homes. And I think it's reasonable to try and improve on that a little bit. The other thing in terms of how would I make a decision, last year at a listening session, I requested a checklist for development so that we as citizens and developers both can all look at the guidance for this is how a process happens. These are the things that we're looking for, and these are where we as the village and the developer may not entirely agree. And these are the points of discussion that we have. And certainly, I think that also helps us with institutional memory with staff that might be retiring or might leave us for other greener pastures. Finally, if you have a checklist and a process that shows where the data points are that you are constantly granting exceptions on, street widths, parking requirements, whatever, and then the village sees that, you can actually go through and in a very methodical way create reasonable change that's incremental and reflects what the community has already discussed. And so I would like to see that. So that's the kind of decisions that I like to make. In regards to TIF, I think most of you probably already know that I am deeply suspicious of using public money. I think, and I firmly believe, that with public money comes corruption. And if we hand out money behind closed doors, that certainly leaves us vulnerable to certain accusations. We had 2 grocery stores that were competing. They both said 2 weeks ago, hands down, they have to have TIF.
Wrong. Festival never won.
I'm going to ask you to please hold your comments. You can talk to them at the end, but this is not a public forum. We were just hearing from the candidates tonight. Thank you.
And so, if I am incorrect, I apologize. There was certainly discussion at the village board for potentially 2 TIFs. And I think that if that's a case, that we may not be doing the due diligence for taxpayers that we could.
It's great to hear community input. So I would start with considering the merits of the proposal. We should always be looking at where's the development going to be placed? How does it affect the character of the village as a whole? These things should all sound familiar if you've seen the comprehensive plan, because that's literally what it says in the comprehensive plan. And the comprehensive plan is really where we should be looking at. I'm sorry, I got shaky hand here. There we go. So we should be looking at how all of this meets the goals of the village. When we have somebody that comes with us with a development idea and it could impact the village greatly, obviously we need to take community input in hand and we need to take it very seriously. When we have people that come with ideas that maybe a little more self-serving to their own plans, then yes, the public is right to look at it with a skeptical eye. It's on the board to give them the opportunity to express that. When your community feels that they're being ignored, then they're going to respond by either A, voting you out of office, or B, causing a lot of scenes with petitions and things that we've seen in recent years. Now, I'm not against petitions. I think that that's a failure of the board. If they're not communicating well enough with the citizenry, that they have to feel that a petition is the only way to get the board to listen, then there is a breakdown in communication. This is a change that needs to occur. Now, when we talk about development, this could be anything: residential, industrial, commercial. So, every one of them should be treated differently. So let's use that to talk about TIFs for a little bit. Now, TIFs, the comprehensive plan, is paramount. But let's break it down to commercial and industrial. So I'm actually going to read a little bit from our actual TIF policy of the village. It says there must be proof of a financial gap in financing. Must be proof. The village policy is this: it's on the requester to prove that they actually need the TIF financing. Now, all this goes on behind closed doors, so as you've heard, some people are a little more skeptical of what goes on behind a closed door. So there needs to be some more open dialogue with the community that they have proven that they have met the need for financial assistance from a TIF on a commercial and industrial project. I mean, interest rates are really low. I'm a banker. I kind of feel like if you have trouble getting money in this environment, you maybe need to go speak with your banker and find out what it is that's wrong with your credit profile that you can't afford to take more money out. Now, for residential, I feel that we really need to start asking the question of those asking for TIF assistance in residential that says, how does this help the community as a whole? There's no one that really asks, are you going to put any affordable housing in with your residential TIF money? That's an important question to ask, because if we're using public funds, it should benefit the public good. If we're using it in a residential area and they're putting in, let's say, condos that are $300,000 or houses that are greater of $500,000, I really don't feel that it's the best use of public funds. I feel it's right to be skeptical about that, and I feel that that proves that there's obviously some sort of ulterior motive in play to try and get public funds for what could be viewed as a vanity project.
So first, we've all said we need to look at the comp plan, but we also have to look at zoning. We have a very defined process that a developer has to go through, and it's laid out through the zoning. And they meet with Kevin Even, who is our planner, and with our other consultants, and they learn what they need to do to get approved. That's the first thing. Does it meet the comp plan? Is the property properly zoned? Do they need a conditional use, which is allowed? What is the design of the project, the architecture? That's very important. How does it fit into the community? We have we have a plan commission, and they have public hearings. We have public hearings at the board. There are opportunities for people to speak out. I do recognize it's difficult to understand development projects sometimes, or anything that comes before us. I know it's difficult, but we do the best that we can. Does it add to Waunakee's quality of life? There are different opinions on that. Not everybody agrees on what a good quality of life is, but what I look at is the whole community, and it will be good for the whole community. As to financial assistance, nobody really likes TIF. Unfortunately, the state allows it. Every community, for the most part, uses it who is eligible. We're in a competitive game. I don't think we give it out willy-nilly. The behind the doors discussion that occurs is a negotiation. Anything that is decided is out in public. Nothing is decided without a public hearing on it. We go to an independent third party to analyze the finances. We have other government units that look at it. Do I wish we didn't have it? I wish we didn't have it because it's so controversial and it's difficult to understand, but we do have it. And it has done some good things for our community. Much of our infrastructure has been paid for through it. That is what you would be paying for on your property taxes if that was not the case. So I see some advantages to it as well. It can be used for workforce housing, and I think that is something we could look at. But single-family housing, it has never been used for. The only TIF that it was used for in housing was multifamily on Main Street, which was a more expensive type project. In hindsight, we probably could have said to them, we'd like you to set aside so many units as affordable or workforce. The key is keeping it that way for the long term. How do you monitor that? Who on the staff is going to watch that for the next 50 years?
Thank you. Of course, we're going to look at the comp plan. We made it. We're very interested in following a plan that we made up. And we had people from Westport, the school system, help us make this up. Of course, we're going to follow it. When we look at a project, yes, if it's a commercial project, is it bringing in a good business we want? Is it going to bring in good jobs, good taxes for everything we need? If it's a housing development, is it going to be used right? Is it going to have the related parks attached to it? Is it going to handle the water, etc.? I think one of our first ones coming up in the near future is off Cop Road. I think the first plan I saw for that piece of property was about 15 years ago. And it put a lot more in there than the current one that we're looking at. The current one we're looking at has parks attached to it, it has groundwater handled, and it'll be a lovely place. Yeah, the lots will be a little bit smaller, but we want to get a little bit more density without using up so many of our farms. Of course, the farmer there wanted to sell it. They've been trying to sell it for 15, 20 years. And they're finally going to get to do it, hopefully. Let's see. On the housing tip and TIFs, I remember our first TIF was when the village bought some property in the edge of town down below North Gear there. It was very successful. Closed out early. The next TIF was an office park TIF. That closed out early. It could have closed out earlier, but we borrowed part of it to work on downtown that wasn't working out. Yes, downtown did have some TIF for housing in there. And then we had a housing TIF, part of a TIF on Q that had some houses in it. But other than that, there has been no TIF for housing. Once again, I'm not in favor of all of them, but it's a necessary evil to compete to get some of these businesses to bring jobs to town.
As far as developments go, the first thing we're going to do is look at the comprehensive plan. When a developer comes to us, they're going to present something that may or may not meet what's in that comprehensive plan. It's our job to hold the comprehensive plan as best we can. There may be things in that project that are of value to the village that we're going to consider. With regards to TIF and the comments that have been out in the community, TIF is both a good and bad thing. We have wonderful TIFs in our community right now that are funding other areas of the community and helping with the tax base. Most people don't recognize those. They try to focus on how does this matter to my bottom line. Your bottom line is generally going to be less taxes as a result of it on your property tax bill. As far as transparency, closed versus open session, it's one of the things that has been in the newspaper and people are talking about. To be very clear, our Plan Commission, our Parks Department, our Public Works, and our Village Board have taken up in the last 12 months 446 different topics. Within those topics, we went into closed session for 22. Of those, 11 were of the same topic. We go into closed session for a negotiation, and with TIF, we don't want to be telling the developers what we're willing to do. That's why we go into closed session. We may have a legal issue. I believe our school board goes into closed session at every meeting they have. But we may have a legal issue that we have to address. That needs to be in closed session. Or we may have a personnel issue. Those are the three reasons that we would go into closed session. Some of the candidates that are running for this need to understand there's a reason for that. It's not that we're trying to hide anything from the community, and I really resent the fact that they make it sound like we're unethical. It's inappropriate, frankly. Thank you.
Development projects, can you all hear me? First criteria, of course, would be what revenue it would bring to the village, first and foremost. The comprehensive plan, of course, that has to be followed first. Otherwise, there was no point in making the plan. Now, if we get a big project, then the village can vote if they want. Of course, they'll vote if they want to have some differences in the comprehensive plan, but that would have to come to a village vote. The village will decide that, not the developers. TIF money is the last resort. We have to find better financing. California has done away with it. I believe it's Boise, Idaho we went from A to a B minus because they're using so many of them. Madison, Soglin just said no more TIFs there unless it's for the exact purpose it was intended, which was blighted properties. We have no blighted properties, not even on 2nd Street. Like, you know, they're not blighted. Go on the internet, look up blighted properties, and then you'll get to see what a blighted property is. These multi-million-dollar spending, when it comes up, the village is going to have to start approving it. The village voters, the taxpayers, will approve that. There has to be some limitation. 40 million in debt, 10 million more is going to be added on from our roads. We've got to get a handle on the spending. And you can have your closed meetings, you can do whatever. Don't forget that the closed meetings, the meetings law was changed. It never was like this. This new closed meeting was a deliberate change brought in through state government that we could go to all these closed sessions. It never used to be like that. 40 years ago, it just wasn't that way. So I think it's everything that's said. Then why are we 40 million in debt? Where's the money for the roads? Why wasn't there a savings account? What are we doing with our budget? I mean, it makes no sense. Nothing makes sense. You just, after a while, you look at this and you go, oh my God, they're just out of control. It's just, we need that type, well, we need some kind of parental, you know, decision up there, something adult. We need some kind of adult supervision, I guess. I don't know. It's just somebody.
I think it's your turn. Mary, is it?
I would expect the developer to have open meetings with residents in the area of the new development before any sanctioned public hearings from the village. The new development should be acceptable to those residents and work for the betterment of Waunakee. If TIF money would be awarded, the development must have a variety of homes and housing that would be different in income levels. This would follow our comprehensive plan as stated on page 42. Could this development be done without TIF money? I want a comparison of paying for the needed infrastructure through village borrowing versus a TIF. If you do village borrowing at a lower interest rate, the increased value of the property goes in the tax rolls right away. Is this development something the village needs? Does it comply with the comprehensive plan? What type of environmental impact will this plan have? How does it affect existing neighborhoods? What value will the new development bring to the tax base? All these are things that should be looked at before a new development reaches the Plan Commission and the board. I'd want to see if the development would occur without TIF money. Last night, Festival Food and Hy-Vee both decided they didn't need TIF money. They were competing against each other. It was easy to do the but-for test, which looks at if a development would occur without the TIF incentive. They both decided it could. I'm concerned that maybe we have given away too much TIF when development would have occurred naturally. I would want the comprehensive plan to be followed. The comprehensive plan says you have to follow our ordinances. So if a TIF request comes in that didn't follow ordinances like the PUD, I would take a look at why it doesn't follow the ordinances. My understanding is that a PUD allows a developer to make their own rules with little village input so far, other than to say the PUD is allowed for flexibility. I have not seen how that flexibility benefits Waunakee. And there is houses in TID 6 right now, 57 lots with 47 homes built. So we do have single family homes in a TID district. If a business needs it, I'd like to know how that business is going to help our community, what it brings to our community, before deciding if it would get a TIF. Thank you.
Okay, now we'll have Ann answer the next question. How do you view the village board's role in supporting local business and community events?
First of all, thank you all so much. I see a few little girl back there. Thank you for investing in our community. And really, it kind of comes down to, I think one of the best things that the village board can do is get out of the way a little bit. And so I'll bring up the experience of Octopi. Octopi had a concept to have food carts and bring them into the village. And I thought that's really great, because one thing that I hear over and over from people is we'd like more restaurants. And right now, what I know about restaurants is they like to pilot and they like to test. And having talked with Food Fight Group, I know that they have some concerns about workforce and committing to a location. So I think allowing food carts in as a potential opportunity is really fantastic. And I was concerned as a resident that we then passed ordinances to restrict the number of food carts allowed in the village. I also hear over and over from businesses that they are struggling, just like some of the residents, to afford to stay in Waunakee. And so I understand that one of the challenges is to create rental and office space that the small businesses that really power our economy can afford to do. And I think that's really important. And I've heard a lot over the past year about needing to compete and use TIF. And like I've said before, I'm not a big fan, because what I see is I've seen businesses do great things without TIF. Look at the Waunakee Furniture exterior remodel. That's a fantastic, beautiful building that people who have deep roots in this community and would never think about taking their business elsewhere did without that TIF money. So I guess for me it comes down to, if that's your demand, how committed to our community are you? And really, are you going to establish those roots? Or are you just going to demand another handout when the time comes? Regarding community events, I believe as a board member, it's my responsibility to be transparent about the community events and committees that I serve. I would take that responsibility very seriously, but I would also anticipate that I would do whatever I need to do in order to make them a success. And that means recruiting volunteers. And that means anyone who is diligent and hardworking, so we don't simply isolate volunteerism within our own social networks. We're a growing community, and I think inviting people to volunteer and work with you is a great way to get to know them and build that strength that is Waunakee. Thank you.
Sorry. So I really think that the board's role in supporting local business is to, first and foremost, is everybody who's on the board really is the face kind of Waunakee. Now obviously, president, and I'm not going to sit up here and not acknowledge the fact that someone like Chris Elner does a ton of work when they're the president, and they, you know, he's present everywhere that he can be, I would think, as the village president when it comes to supporting local businesses. And I think that that's great. I think that board members should be sharing in that. I think that board members should be advocates for local business. You know, and I really think that it starts with you know, making sure that we are participating with local businesses. Now, for me personally, that would mean getting the Waunakee Economic Development Commission active again. Hasn't met in almost a year now. I feel like it's an important venue for local businesses to reach out to do business, and do business with and in the village. I can tell you that working, in my area where I kind of sell a product where I work, it's very difficult to do business in areas where that you don't know how the municipality is going to act. And if our local businesses know that they can come to the board and how the board is going to treat them in advance by working with either through the Economic Development Commission or by working with the board directly, board members directly, then it will give them the ability to act confidently in the village, to know that they're not wasting their time on trying to develop new areas in their business or move their business into Waunakee, or if they're having issues that they want to leave Waunakee, that the village at least gets a chance to compete on those offers. It seems that all too often that many people just feel that they don't know who to contact about these issues. So without a standing committee that's meeting regularly, we don't have a way for petitioners to be heard. The other part of this is that we really need to direct staff that work for the village to embody this. If their local businesses feel that the staff aren't helping them, they should be reaching out to their elected officials so that the elected officials can tell the staff to do their jobs. We're kind of, your elected officials are the ones that are responsible for hiring the staff. They should make sure that the staff are completing their jobs as assigned. If there's any problems, it shouldn't be a problem to reach out to a board member to say, hey, I reached out to somebody in engineering and nobody ever got back to me. We should be responding at least within the same day to say, hey, we got your request, we'll get back to you as soon as we can. For community events, I really think that the village board's role is to provide, support to those events, to make sure that they can get their temporary licensing for alcohol distribution, to make sure that community spaces are made available. But I also really wanted to touch on, and I touched on this earlier, the Creative Economy Initiative that we commissioned last year. We really should take things like that and run with it. Art on Main, the Imagination Celebration, things like that. These brought tourism dollars to Waunakee, and we really need to go back and make sure that we're putting all the tourism efforts that we can out there, because those do impact local businesses and they do help the tax base.
I had asked for a clarification on this question. I see everybody misunderstood it like I had originally, so I'm going to answer it the way everybody else is. So the first question is supporting local businesses. I am very proud of the fact that our board has worked with the chamber very closely, and I think has forged a close relationship with it through Todd Schmidt, who not only is our administrator, but our economic development manager. There were many years in the past when there was not a very good relationship between the chamber and the village, and there definitely is today, at least I believe there is. Todd goes to the chamber meetings, he goes to Rotary, he goes to Lions, he has a task of going out and speaking to individual business people on a regular basis, because what we want to do is preemptive and find out what kinds of issues are out there before they become too problematic. He has an open door policy. He's only one person, and there's 250 plus businesses, so you can imagine the choice, how much work that is in addition to being the administrator. But we try very hard to work closely with the business community because they're the heart of our economy, and it's important. As to community events and business events, which I had understood, we're supportive. We provide in-kind with police, with public works, with parks. When the events need our facilities, we provide the support that events need. We look at this as tourism dollars and activities for our community to enhance our quality of life. And I think that has happened. We even have a village president who has invented and worked very hard on a holiday event and also the Waunakee, which did not exist before. But again, that comes from many volunteers in the community. We try to make this a community-wide event, and it makes us who we are in Waunakee. It makes us want to live here.
Yes, we should continue to support our citizens, business and private. I say continue. We haven't been guilty of not listening to them. We haven't been guilty of not going out and meeting with them. In fact, Todd has one-on-ones meetings every week, 3 to 5 of them. We've been guilty of being very active with our business community. And we'll continue to be very active with our business community because we have good staff. No one has been ignoring them. As far as community events, that's part of our flavor. Yes, we got to stay on top of that. We've got to continue to work with the Relay for Life, the Girls on the Run, the Try for Kids, Waunakee, Walktoberfest, the St. John's Picnic, etc. The creative initiative thing, that's been going on for like 5 years. Yes, we've been reaching out to those people. Yes, we've been attacking that on a tourism issue. And yes, Waunakee is a great deal. And no village tax dollars are spent on Waunakee. Perhaps a little bit more police presence, but all the fireworks, all that stuff is done with private donations. Yes, we're listening, and we'll continue to listen.
I'm not going to talk about Waunakee. I don't think I need to within this. But what I will say is in support of the village businesses, I said right off the bat that they're part of the backbone of our community. All of those festivals and events that we just heard from the other board members, those are funded generally by those business communities, by the business community. If we didn't have that, most of them wouldn't take place. Waunafest, great thing for our community. It supports our clubs in a big way. It's one of their major fundraisers every year. Of course, the village is going to participate and make sure we have it as a secure location. Security is key for that. All right, anytime we have people going anywhere now in a large group, the world has told us we need to make sure it's secure. So we're going to make sure we participate as a village for any of those. As far as the businesses, how can we support them? We can support them, but more importantly, the residents need to support them. If the residents support the local businesses, that's what makes them go. There's 8 of us up here. I don't think we can keep any one of them in business if we were all going there on a regular basis. So it's important that people support our local businesses. The board is going to do everything we can to help them. All right, we heard last night, if you were paying attention at the board meeting, one of our businesses considering leaving. I took it upon myself to try to figure out a way to keep them in Waunakee. Same thing, Ms. Lewandowski talked about Octopi. Octopi would not be here today if for not TIF. TIF is what brought Octopi into the community. The whole corridor coming into Waunakee on Q. Most of those businesses did not receive any incentives through the TIF. They came here on their own accord. But we do have a beautiful road coming into our community, which looking out into the future, as we talked about cars in our community, if you realize this, if this isn't going to come as a shock to some of you, for every voter in the community, there's 2 cars per voter. So that traffic issue we talk about, yeah, it's tough to knock that traffic issue down when the people of our community like to drive. So does DeForest, so does Dane, so does Lodi. All of our surrounding communities that come through here, shop, buy gas, do all the other things when they're on their way to Madison to work generally. So to say we're going to take away that traffic real easily is not going to happen. We're in Dane County, the fastest growing community or county in the state of Wisconsin. So absolutely we're going to continue to support our businesses and all of our festivals. And one of them, I'll give my own plug for that, it's done by volunteers and the business community. I just came up with the idea. And I work hard at it to make sure it's a successful thing for the community. Thanks.
The supporting our businesses, we hear about all this, but if you really want to support the businesses in this community, then we need to take the burden off of their backs for the taxes. Any given community will support so many businesses, small businesses. Beyond that, they will not support, depending on the income of the people and how many businesses they can support. We'll take Dane, for instance. How many hairdressers can you have up there? How many carpenters? How many plumbers? How many masons? You run out. But if we would spend as much time looking for a futuristic 21st century modern technical industry that might be willing to come to Waunakee because of Madison and the location here with our highway system, our rails, and so on. That gives us the tax base we really need, and that frees up all the small businesses. That makes sense. This continued harping on small businesses, it's wonderful. Every community is limited by the amount of money that people can pay for those services. Like I said, how many plumbers can you have? How many masons? How many this? How many grocery stores? How many small stores? How many gas stations? It gets to be a numbers game where you run out of people to pay it. So we can chase this small business thing all we want. If we were smart, we'd be looking into the future for a nice technical unit to come here. We've got the university, we've got everything we need here. The top three, they're in the top 5, Madison is consistently. Best places to live in the country. We're only 12 miles away. If you owned a big tech company out in California, if you were looking for a Midwest location, come on, think about it. What are you going to sell them on? Main Street? You going to sell them on that? Or are you going to sell them on great location, universities right here close? Look, it's one of the top universities in the world, for crying out loud. What are we, 27th in the, I know, it's huge. We aren't using any of that. We're worrying about, we're chasing something that is going to take care of itself. We need to move into the future. We need new voices, we need a new idea.
I think that the board's support of local businesses should be minimal and that the support should be on a two-way street. I feel this way because we have a Waunakee Economic Development Committee which hasn't met in over a year, and I feel that committee could be the voice for the board. That committee should include some citizen members. It appeared to be totally business focused in the past when it did meet. Citizens are businesses' customer base, so finding out what people want is important. I would look at what all the businesses do to help the village and grow and what they will do to help the village events. These events could include support for Waunafest, Oktoberfest, tree lighting, WNC and WEB, food pantry with food baskets at Thanksgiving, Christmas, and Easter baskets. Committees for any of these events should be well-defined and publicly posted, advocating for village residents to volunteer as they are able. I would be interested in combining Waunafest and Wanaboom. There are only so many people who volunteer, and having 2 large events in the same month doesn't make sense to me. I love Garage Sale Weekend, and that is something the Chamber does well, and we could look at partnering more with that event. I have volunteered at my church, at the American Legion in Dane, at Wanaboom, and delivering Easter baskets, and at the food pantry. Waunakee has given a lot to me, and so it is important to give back. I would like to see volunteer opportunities posted on Nextdoor and put in the upcoming events part of the paper. If we need to purchase something for the village, I would like to see if we can give village businesses the first crack at that. The Chamber does a good job, but I would want more oversight of WEDC money going to the Chamber. Something else the board can do is making sure development includes housing that workers can afford. This would improve the ability to have workforce available to fill positions.
As far as the village board and the business community, I think that, at least for myself, I think over the last 20 years, if you talk to business owners within the community, you find that I've always been open, and I think that interaction is really important to understand what those business owners need. So when you're looking at projects and you're looking ahead in budgets and you're trying to understand what the community needs, our local business owners have they really understand this community, and I think that interaction between the board and them is very important. When we talk about support for events within the community, today we have this wonderful facility, and we're soon going to have a brand new public library. It is 2 of the only places in this community where young and old people get together and communicate and interact, and you really get a feel for the community. The other thing that happens at the events we have, we give our department heads in the village latitude to let their workers, public works, EMS, police, the volunteer fire department, they have the latitude to work at those events. And what that allows to do in this community, if the only time I interact with the Waunakee police is because I get pulled over on Woodland Drive with my 2 young kids in the back, it's not a very good experience for anyone. What our events allow, if it's Wanafest or Oktoberfest or Wanabooms, young kids can walk up to the police who are monitoring that event, they can interact with them and actually see the professionalism of the employees of this community. When our public works guys are helping out at Wanabooms, the people see what they do day in and day out, and I think it reflects positively on the community and the professionalism of the staff that we have.
Okay, we're up to our 4th question. This is the last one, and we'll have Robert start this time.
Sorry.
How would you describe your leadership style, and how would it help you lead and work with others as a village trustee or village president?
Sorry about that. So my leadership style basically is that there's 2 key components of my leadership style. The first is, and I'm going to kind of steal from my employer here because I like it a lot. It's called respectfully informed. It basically means that if you are dealing with someone on an issue, you make sure that you respond to them timely and that you make sure that they are as aware of the situation as they can be. This is because, I feel like when you're dealing with your local government, you don't want any surprises from your local government. You don't want to show up in a meeting and be completely blindsided. If there's a way that I can give more transparency, and I'd probably have to work with the village on this because I'm sure they have a social media policy that would not work with this, but if we need to change a policy, that you can reach out to your trustee and through social media, because that seems to be what everybody likes to do these days, then that's something that we should look into. The other part of my leadership style is that I like to put experienced people into positions where they know what they're doing, and then I like to get out of the way. I feel that it's important that we hire, that since this is not a full-time job, that we hire staff that, that we can rely on them to do things. Yes, there needs to be oversight, and that process would be followed, but we should always be trying to attract the best and the brightest to our staff so that we can be sure that the day-to-day business is being taken care of and that there's no question as to whether or not the village has any liability due to having staff that don't know what they're doing. Now, working with others, that's just going to be a lot of practice and empathy. I come from Southbridge, and comes from Main Street. Frank is Phil.
I'm down in behind the high school.
So we're all in different areas. We all have different needs. We all come from different backgrounds. I'm not a lifelong resident of Waunakee. I will admit that. I do not bleed purple, as Chris Zelder once yelled at a meeting. I would be an imposter if I did that. But I am able to recognize that we have very different needs. We have to be able to listen to each other. We say a lot of caustic things up here about each other, but at the end, we're all residents of Waunakee. We're all still going to be residents of Waunakee after this election ends. If we have lingering doubt as to whether somebody actually represents us as a resident when they're sitting up on the board, you're going to continue to carry that doubt, you're going to let it fester, and you're just going to assume that everything that the board does is not in your best interest and somehow serving someone else's interest. The transparency that comes from leadership is important. The transparency tells everyone, I know what I'm getting when I deal with this person at my government. If we lose that transparency, then we're no longer leaders. We're just people sitting up here making decisions that you'll never understand, and you're just going to think, why am I even paying my taxes? Thanks.
I think something we all forget is there's about 8,800 registered voters in this community. And I think the majority, well over 95% of them, seems, because they don't come to our meetings or write to us upset, etc., are pretty content with this community and happy to be here. I've been on the village board for 14 years, and I've had various board members who've served on the board with me over time. And the way that I like to act is to ask a lot of questions, make sure that we are well informed. I like to listen to other people, bring other viewpoints forward, and have a discussion. I don't like to act on issues without having had some time to consider them and for discussion. Probably the best, most recent example was the vaping ordinance, which I support, but had come to us, and I wanted it to go out for a public hearing first before we actually voted on it, just because it was, I think, a significant policy, a good policy, but it should be discussed. I think honesty, integrity, knowledge, listening, and putting the good of the whole community ahead of yourself and your personal gain is what is most important for someone who is on the village board. I think our boards over the years, even before me, have worked really well together. They reach a consensus. You don't get everything you want or that you believe in. There's give and take depending on what the issue is. And I think that everybody is treated with respect regardless of what their position is, which I think is very important. And I think we've tried to be as open. We've tried to improve on our openness over time. We've gotten some good suggestions from community members this year, and we've implemented those with YouTube and other things. I mean, there's always more you can do, but there's always something else you can do and something else you can improve upon. So if we listen and if it's feasible, one thing to remember is we have a really small staff. They do a lot of work in this community, and they have a capacity. So we have to be careful if we don't want to add too many staff and increase our taxes too much as to how much we put on them. So we're very respectful of our staff and of I think, people in the community. And while we listen, and I think that in the end, the decisions we make are what we feel is in the best interest. We don't do anything that we believe would hurt this village.
I'm supposed to describe my leadership style. I guess it's kind of laid back and analytical. I like to do a lot of research. I like to take advantage of people's strengths. We have good staff. When the question kept coming up, everybody being, not everyone, a lot of people excited about our $40 million debt. I think our $40 million debt is just a reasonable mortgage. When I did a little research about it, I found out that yes, we have a utility company worth $50 million. It has $10 million worth of debt. It's kind of manageable. We have some of these big new buildings. We're building a library that's part of this debt. If we didn't borrow the money to build the library, then the people that are going to be using it are going to be paying for it and not going to be able to use it. If we had to save up the money before we built the library, most of the people in this room would be deceased before the library went up. That's the way it works. We have to borrow money in villages and towns to build things when they're needed for people to use them that are going to be paying for them. Thank you.
I feel like Phil was looking at my sheets of paper up here, a couple of those things. But I'm just going to point out a couple quick things here. So you do know where all of us live. And if I'm wrong with any of these, please tell me, okay? I believe Frank is in the downtown, Ann's in the downtown, Mary's in the downtown. Robert, you're next door to Susan in Southbridge. They're Southbridge neighbors. Phil is in Castle Creek, and I'm in Westview Meadows. The current board, as it sits, is probably the most diverse we've had in years as far as locations in the community. Sam Ballig is in Savannah Village. I'm in Westview Meadows. Susan Southbridge. Aaron is in downtown. Joe Zisselberger's in Meadowbrook. And Phil and Bill Ranum are in Castle Creek. So we're pretty diverse right now across the board. And I'm just going to start by saying, as far as leadership style, since Frank and I are both looking at running for village president, there's a couple things. First, Frank, thank you for your service to the country. I saw that online, that you served the country, so thank you for that. We actually both married our high school sweethearts. So that's another thing that we have in common. And we both, I believe, care deeply about our village. It's important to both of us. We do have different ideas and thoughts on how the village should be run and what the future is going to look like. If you have ever come to a board meeting, committee meeting, anything like that, you'll see that I tend to start the discussion and let the other members speak. As village president, I don't believe I think it's important that I don't help to form their opinion. I want them to be giving their own opinions, and then I will talk after that. I'm pretty consistent with that in every meeting that I do. I rely heavily on our committees. One of the things the board implemented years back was we rotate our committees on a regular basis. I was at the Public Works meeting a couple of weeks back, and I served on that committee before I became president, and there was only one person, I believe, on that committee that was still when I was there. So we definitely have new people and new blood constantly on our committees. Our board, we also have new members. Aaron Moran, Joe Zitzelberger, new to the board from the last election. Bill Random was in his first term. Sam Baldwin was in his first term. He basically served one term. So we don't have a board that's just the old timers. We have a very good diverse board right now, and if you look at the ages across the board, you'll see that we have a definite swing of ages compared to what the board was previously. I was actually the youngest on the board when I started. So that's definitely changed. With my last 30 seconds, I'm going to run through quick. Festival and Hy-Vee. Festival and Hy-Vee were not looking for the TIF. It was the developers that would go for TIF, if they were going to. It was a leverage point for us. Hy-Vee came originally for the TIF, Forward Development Group came for the TIF, not Hy-Vee. And it was $4.5 million they came for to start with, and then it went to $2 million. And then another developer came, and all of a sudden there's no TIF for either. So the negotiation worked.
Leadership style, of course it's all in the proper training, and then I like to coach after that. The crews I used to run, we get them heavily trained and then coach them to go out and get their jobs done. Did a lot of refereeing, of course, you end up doing that. But I believe very heavily in a level playing field for all. That has to be absolutely the first thing you do. If you show any favoritism at all, it puts a rotten apple into the barrel, so to speak. I also firmly believe that you have to be at arm's length. You cannot be involved with pressure groups in the community, special groups that are formed for promoting their cause and so on. You have to be at arm's length. You cannot make a good decision, especially when you're dealing with the millions of dollars of taxpayers' money. You cannot make a good decision unless you are at arm's length. The president of the village has to be at arm's length. I would like to see all the trustees at arm's length. And it simply means you're not influenced by anyone. You all got children. You were all young at once. You all know what influence did to you or didn't do to you, or your children. How many of you have said, no, I don't want you going out with them, I don't want you palling around with them because it was influence. Can you imagine going to work every day, working in a high ramped up business environment, boom, 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 profit, 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 and then you come home to the village, it's a totally different concept. You have to leave all that behind you and step into village shoes. It's not a high competitive run business. It's lots of tax dollars that can be used inappropriately. And you have to slow down and you really have to watch very closely what's going on. And that's what I would like to see more here in the village. There's too much of this and not enough of separation. And I think that would be a wise thing to do. As Chris gets older, I think he'll see more of that. And I hate doing all this because I like Chris. He's a nice guy. He always will be. And like I said, I think as he moves on in his life, he'll even be better, and he'll be better at what he does. But I would really like to see that arm's length separation. I also like to move conversation to more transparency. Oh, I'm done.
As I do in my computer business, I would listen to what people say, see what their needs are, and then come up with a plan to solve the issues. I've supervised people when I worked at the state. I was a closing manager at the O'Malley's Farm Cafe restaurant for many years. I was a department coordinator for the Partners in Giving campaigns. I actually won an award for my work with this. Anytime you're supervising, managing, or working on a committee, you need to listen to everyone's opinion. A recent example of my seeing a need and fulfilling it was working with the Friends to create the Friends of Waunakee Facebook page, which informs citizens about charitable events and posts when government meetings will occur. I want the trustees to hear from both citizens and business. After looking at both sides of an issue, we can discuss how to make an informed choice. My leadership is collaborative, and I will work with others to make sure everyone's voice is heard equally. I know that I won't always agree with board members or the president, but I will be respectful of their opinions. I will review the agenda packets before meetings, and I would push for them to come out early enough for citizens to review them too. I'm a pleasant and agreeable person, and although we all have different ideas of how Waunakee should grow, I think the reason we are running is that we all love Waunakee. And at the end of the day, we are all still neighbors and citizens, and we should be cordial, but I am not going to remain silent if I disagree with something. If elected, I will represent the citizens and involve them more in the process.
I would say that my leadership style is, and I've been fortunate over the last 20 years in Waunakee to be around some of the, really, probably 20 years, I guess it would be around people on boards and commissions in this community, and on the village board, some outstanding people. The highest integrity, a passion for Waunakee, and they taught me to really focus on the important things. How do you make Waunakee better every day when you wake up in the morning? I think my leadership style is probably by example. I think for those that know me in the audience, and those of you who don't, I volunteer in this community a lot. I'm very passionate about everything about this community. I want it to be better, and I work real hard to make it that way, and people follow me because they believe in what I do for the community. I think I've always been open to people's views. I think I have the highest integrity, and my goal in this community is to make Waunakee a better place to live. Thanks.
Thank you. So I have a couple of interesting thoughts. So I guess I misunderstood. I thought Occupy's first TIF request had been declined and they expanded with the TIF, and also that the TIF agreement proposed with Hy-Vee was with the store, whether or not that was funded through the developer. So obviously these are very confusing issues, and transparency can help us as citizens really understand, because these misunderstandings start with the communication of our leaders. And so if we're not as transparent and clear with people, I believe as leaders that ultimately comes back on us, because we are not communicating as effectively as we can. So I work with people across the nation and across Wisconsin, and as a leader, what I acknowledge is that you have to build commonalities and identify common goals. I never have sticks with the people that I work with. They work with me because they want to and because they believe in the goals and objectives that we have agreed upon as a group to move forward. And they know that we will work to make those happen. The future is not created, it's co-created with all of us. No matter what we say up here, we will be obliged to work together to create the best future for Waunakee. And sometimes that involves a really deep dive into the issues, and we probably won't all agree. But you know what? After that rough meeting, I hope that we can go out, have a beer, have a meal together, and remember that we are ultimately people who decided to live here in this community, and we want to do the best thing for it. And so, one of the things that I believe fundamentally as a leader is that leadership requires a knowledge of innovation, and innovation requires leaders to acknowledge when they do not know what the next step is. And so for that, leaders need to build teams. And they need to be able to define what the right question is moving forward. And then they need to be able to discover those new answers. They need to be open. And sometimes experience actually works against us in that instance. Because I don't know about you, but I've hired people who know it. They've done it other places. And really, they're so locked in to those old ideas that they cannot actually go out and explore and innovate. So really, what's important is how you make decisions, how you approach things, and what are your ultimate responsibilities. And I believe that the people of Waunakee sit here, the trustees sit here, and really staff sit here. Thank you.
Okay, those are all the questions that we have. If the candidates want to answer questions, I think we're doing it informally, and we are going to stop videotaping at this point. This wasn't meant to be a public forum taking questions from the audience.